All right. We are good. Hello, my friends. It's Jill Osborne from the Interstitial Cystitis Network. It is Sunday, May 10th of 2026, and it is time for another IC support group meeting. However, it is in fact Mother's Day. And so I'm going to anticipate that we're probably going to have more people watching this recorded rather than watching live because you should be doing Mother's Day things. If you have a mother that is still with you and has loved on you and has cared for you and who has driven you to doctor's appointments like mine did, please, please, please make some time to tell her how much you appreciate her. Normally, when I do these meetings, I do a little 30-minute intro and then we take questions. I will tell you, I have a ton of information to share about. Let me introduce myself to anybody new out there. My name is Jill Osborne. I am the president and founder of the Interstitial Cystitis Network. I work with men and women who have pelvic pain, pelvic injuries, bladder issues, prostate issues. The things you don't want to talk about to other people, you can talk to me about. And I always say, listen, nothing is off the table. I am more than happy to take any question you might have. Now, right now we are live streaming on YouTube and on Facebook. And as always, Facebook has frozen. I mean, I can see your comments, but that's all I can see. I don't understand what's happening with Facebook, but it is. Hello, Ann. Nice to see you. So we got a little bit of a crowd coming in. Hey, man, I got some great news here. I was shocked. We passed 1 million views on YouTube yesterday. I didn't even think we were close. So I'm very proud that after all this time, our IC message has been seen over 1 million times on YouTube. Yeah. I was the first to put IC videos online, but then of course I got very distracted caring for my elderly parents and breast cancer. But now I'm back. I am working. I have got lots of fun things. A super exciting thing that I have got to share with you today. Okay. So again, I'm happy to take any question you might have. If you're hanging out with your mom right now, if there's anything you want me to, any questions you have from her, I am happy to help her. And I really want to say thank you to her. Before we get into the other stuff that you're gonna love, I just want to take a moment and just honor our moms. Listen, my symptoms started when I was 13. And my mother worked full-time. And she was there for me always. She coordinated every doctor's visit. She got me to every treatment. She drove me down to Stanford to see doctors down there. There was nobody you would want at your side more than my mother. If you were in the emergency room, she sat with you. And she was just this warm, loving force. It was like just a calm port in the storm. And I lost her 3 years ago this month. And as difficult as that was, and that's one of the hard things about Mother's Day. For those of us who don't have our moms anymore, we miss them. We miss them dearly. But I also feel her. And I think it's really important that we remember that the love that our mom showed us when we were kids gets passed along in the love we show to those in our lives. And the other really challenging thing about Mother's Day, there are some people out there who did not have good mothers or whose mothers passed away at a very young time. And Mother's Day is one of those holidays, kind of like Valentine's Day, that brings out lots and lots of different emotions. It's important that we all remember that our lifetime is a new start, that we don't have to continue the things that our parents did. If you do not feel like you were treated well, make sure that you start a new tradition this year, that you don't pass along those, that you look at every day as an opportunity to be with your kids and be with your partner and be with your pets. If you're a pet mom, I don't have children. I always thought that I would have children. I'm shocked that I don't have children. And I will confess that when my IC started, I just wondered if I could be a good mother. I mean, I was so consumed with health issues in my 20s and in my 30s and I always had hope. I always believed that I would have children, but you know what? It just didn't happen. But you know what? I'm a good mom too, because I was the mom to my elderly parents the last 15 years of their lives. So I'm going to celebrate what I did on this day too. Over on the IC Network, we have a great article about that honors not only our moms, but also those of you with IC who are trying to be a good mom. And I'm going to tell you right now, IC patients make great mothers. They make great mothers. You will be a great mother. And one of the blessings of this is that you understand implicitly that if somebody is in pain, you need to be there with them. The gift of this, if there's any weird random gift that happens, is compassion. And I'm going to argue that you will be a better mother because of this experience, because you will never, ever walk away from a family member or a child who's in pain. Anyway, we have a lot more tips on things that will make it easier for you. I also have a really sweet book called My Mom Has IC that you can use to explain IC to any children that are in elementary schools to help them understand why you're going to the doctor. Because listen, kids see everything. They see everything. If they see you going to the doctor, they see you crying at night, if they see you running to the bathroom, they're monitoring it. They might be 5 years old, but they're worried. And it's very important we take the fear away from them. And that book will do that. I had one young mother. The reason why we created that book is I had a young mother call me who ended up realizing when she was talking to her daughter, who was very young, her daughter was crying. And she was asking her daughter, what's wrong? And her daughter thought she was dying because she was going to the doctor so much. She was going to the doctor for bladder installations. And we realized that there was a really important need that we take the fear away from that. So it's called My Mom Has IC. It's over on the IC Network website. Not sure where my demo is. I have a demo of it too somewhere. But anyway, for all of you out there, if you're a mom, happy Mother's Day. If you're a grandmother, happy Mother's Day. If you're a young IC patient trying to be a mom, happy Mother's Day. We see you, we hear you, we love you, we support you. And we honor you today. All right. Kayleen says, happy Mother's Day. Yesterday was Kiara's 10th birthday, and I can't believe I rescued her with my bare hands. You see, you're a pet mom. There you go. Love it. Okay. Now, okay. There's just so much going on. I don't even know where to start. Our brand new magazine, the IC Optimist, is now available. And so if you're a member, you can download this right from your member page right now in the IC Network shop. Love, love, love this cover. Looks great. And in this magazine, the print version arrived on Friday. It will be mailed out to those who get it by mail early this week. So we have an article on retinal damage with bladder installations. And you guys, let's do a sound check. Is the sound okay? Please let me know if the sound's okay. Post-UTI hypersensitivity syndrome is a new study that came out that helps us understand why you feel like you still have a bladder infection even after the infection is gone. It's all about nerves that are healing. We have a really nice article on nocturia. That's the common causes of why you might be getting up at night that might not relate to IC. A little consumer awareness about estrogen, the use of estrogen. The most unusual case of a UTI I've ever encountered, and that was pink mold. Can you imagine having pink mold causing your bladder infection? Pink mold actually grows on soap scum. But if you have pink mold growing in your shower or your bathtub and you use that shower or bathtub and you have a cut, guess what? That pink mold will go right in and it can cause sepsis and it can be fatal. So pink mold in your bathroom's actually potentially quite dangerous. So that's a very interesting story. Let's see. Little article on the mental load of IC and how hard we work, having to plan our days around food and all sorts of stuff like that. Lupus, discussion of lupus. We've got, of course, the latest research. We have weight loss, something on weight loss. Weight loss is definitely challenging when you have IC, and some great springtime meal ideas. Okay, so anyway, for our members out there, you can download this right on your member page over in the IC Network shop. Or if you're interested in getting this, you can buy single copies, you can buy a PDF, or you can buy the print version. Either or, you can do that in the IC Network store. This is our 24th year of doing this magazine. It's my baby. I think I do my best work here. Okay. Now for my old timers, who know me, one of the things that I've always prided myself in doing is being really innovative. How can we use the internet? How can we use tools to bring support to patients who are homebound, patients who don't have good medical care, patients who are struggling, the patients who might not be able to afford to go to a doctor, all that sort of stuff, right? And so years ago, I created obviously we helped create the very first IC diet list. That was back in the 90s. We created the old Flare guide. I was the first person to ever do that. Obviously, we built our website. We had a giant forum that 200,000 patients a month used in its heyday. Of course, people don't use forums anymore now. So we have a lot of accumulated kind of data and knowledge. And then we started building apps, and I created a food list. And it's a hysterical story because it's an example of me being a little bit too cocky in a way. I can build a website. I can code a website. I know how to do that. And I thought, certainly I can build an app. Yeah, right. No. I signed up for a class that kicked my what. I had to hire somebody to do it. But we built a food app, and that food app was used by thousands of patients on Android and iPhone. But it was free, which is fine. But it cost me $20,000 to build back 15 years ago, man. And every time it had to be updated, it was another $20K because you had to build it on Apple and you had to build it on Android and you had to do all this stuff. And it just got to the point where it's just too expensive. So I pulled them off of the app stores last year. And I'm just like, I can't afford this anymore. 20,000 a pop. Well, I happened to meet a young designer from South America who is brilliant. And he helped me with another project. We copied our IC Network forum over to a new website, saved all the data. And he said, got any other work for me? And I went, hey man, you know how to build an app? He goes, yeah. And I'm like, tell me more. And this young man is just brilliant and affordable. I can afford it. And we now have a brand new food app that is so much better than anything we've ever done before. And so I want to show it to you. Now I'm probably going to reskin it. It's ready to go. I just have to do a couple of graphics and then I can it's already in the App Store, but you can't see it yet because it hasn't been finally approved. But it's very, very close, like 99% done. So let's see. How can I do this? Can I show you this? Well, my phone's too bright. Let me try it on my iPad. I'm going to do a video. Don't worry. So you'll be able to see it. Let me see if I can make this work on my iPad a little bit more. Okay, is that still bright? Okay, hold on. Okay. Oh, why is it so bright? Darn it. Okay, I want to make this work, darn it. Okay, well, you can kind of see it here. Whoops. Hold on, I'm excited. Okay, so if I bring this in here, there you go. Now you can kind of see it. So we've got categories, right? So fruits and veggies, grains, breads, pastries, dairy, meats, beverages, snacks and sweets, spices, condiments, food additives, vitamins and supplements, right? So now our foods, instead of being one giant alphabetized list, they're broken into categories. So let's go to fruits and veggies. So in each category is an alphabetized list of foods, right? I don't even know how many foods we've got in here. We've got hundreds of foods in here. So you can search manually through it. And then if you want to know more, let's say about apples. So let's click on apples and look at that. You've got green, yellow, and red. Green are the foods that are bladder friendly, usually. Yellow are the try-its, worth a try, and red, the bottom one, is the one we now think you need to avoid. These are the caution foods. So here, so let me go back. So we're going to go back to the categories, and let's go to dairy, right? And so now we're going to go to cheese. See this? What are the bladder-friendly cheeses? American, mozzarella, cheddar, mild cheddar, feta, ricotta. What are the try-its? Blue cheese and the Parmesan, things like that. What are the ones that we need to avoid? The heavily processed ones and heavily spiced ones. Cool, right? Okay, so I'm going to go back to categories. Whoops, let me go back. Okay, let's go to meat. And let's go to bacon. There you go. Bacon. What are the good bacons? Uncured, preservative-free turkey or pork bacon. Try it. Are mildly spiced cured bacon products. Heavily cured, preserved, smoked, or spiced should be avoided. Right? Okay. Whoops. Hold on a sec. Okay, so now I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to my category list. So anyway, whoops. So we have all the spices. We've got lots. Sorry, I was gardening yesterday. I did not have time to do my fingernails. Okay, come back. Hold on. All right, I lost my face. Hold on one sec. Darn it, I wish I could make it work on my phone. Let me try my phone. If I hold that up really close. Now, see, the phone is just too bright. Darn it. Anyway, there is this great search page where you type it in and it will immediately, so you put in coffee or put in bacon, it will immediately display your search results. But here's the cool thing. It's got an AI interface now where you can ask questions. And the answers are spectacular. They're based not from the web, they're based from our website. They're based from our publications. And this AI interface, I am absolutely in love with. Absolutely in love with it. So the app is hopefully will be released later this week. And it is the start of many more things that we're doing. You know, I'm just not. Hi, Bonnie. Nice to see you, hon. Hello, Robbie. Robbie says, why avoid red apples? I thought Granny Smith were more acidic. Well, red apples tend to be a little bit, they're not as acidic as Granny Smith, but they are still much more acidic than, say, a Gala or a Fuji. Now, people are going to say, where did you get your data? And that's a really, really good question. Our data comes from both research studies and 30 years of patient reports. And so, it was Beverly Lauman, who was the Orange County IC support group leader. I was the Northern California IC support group leader. She and I worked together and created the very first big list years and years and years ago. So there's just a lot of wisdom gained over the years working with thousands of patients and them telling us what works for them and what doesn't work for them. Okay, I got an eyelash in my eye. Hold on. What is that? Got something in my eye. Are we out? Okay, we'll see. Okay, so, and then we are massively updating our store. We've got brand new software coming in. That's a 2-month project. Woo! Going to be a lot of fun new things with that. New memberships, new freebies, all sorts of things going on with that. And then what else am I working on? I'm not starting our Summer Optimist yet. Oh, so now we are just very, very close to releasing our new patient roster or patient list, patient data that we're collecting over Elmeron use, specifically documenting patients who have used it orally as a bladder installation and injections for those who use it for arthritis. And we're probing about how long you used it and if you have any retinal symptoms and or bowel symptoms, because we need to collect that data. Because every day now, pretty much almost every day, several times a week, I get a phone call now from a patient newly diagnosed either with eye issues or with bowel issues. And the bowel issues are what we're really trying to understand now, because patients are having their bowels removed. And I was just working with a patient literally last week who didn't show eye issues, but she's got massive polyposis. Polyposis means you have an uncontrolled growth of polyps in your bowel. And some of the polyps get so big, they can block the bowel, but other polyps are precancerous polyps. And what happens apparently is as you have a polyp removed, it regrows, and sometimes more regrow than you originally had. And worse, patients are getting what we call carpet polyps. That means that their bowel becomes a carpet of polyps. So there are hundreds and hundreds of polyps. Most of those are in the more risky category of polyps, where eventually a doctor may say, hey, I think we need to consider removing your bowel. And getting your bowel removed is not easy. It is very, very difficult. There are a lot of long-term consequences that you have to deal with if you need to have a colectomy. You can have long-term persistent diarrhea afterwards. You can, you have to change the way you eat sometimes. It's really not an easy surgery to go through. So anyway, that's it on my end. Now, let's see here. Hold on a sec. And I swear, I still have an eyelash in my right eye. Do I? You know, hold on. I got to go get whatever's out of my eye. I'll be right back. Hold on. Well, all right. It's always something. Such as life, it's always something. Robbie says, how does stevia affect IC? Well, the problem is with the artificial sweeteners is that we really don't know. And that's a fundamental problem. For example, NutraSweet is metabolized into formic acid and formaldehyde. So NutraSweet is really well known to be quite bladder irritating, even of healthy bladders. And we just don't have enough information on the other artificial sweeteners to really understand the effect that their long-term use could cause. And that is why the World Health Organization last year or 2 years ago issued a statement in which they just said flat out, we don't think anybody in the world should be using any artificial sweetener. We just don't know enough about the long-term risks. Except we do know that artificial sweeteners are absolutely linked to weight gain and obesity. You know, and a lot of people say, well, I don't want to eat sugar because I'll take the artificial sweetener because then I won't gain weight. Well, the problem with an artificial sweetener, and it's a brain problem in a way, and that is artificial sweeteners are much, much sweeter than sugar. And when you put that in your mouth, let's say you're chewing gum that has an artificial sweetener in there, your brain goes, ooh, sweetness, energy, energy, energy. And your body prepares to receive the energy. There's a lot of signaling that happens between your tongue and the nerves in your mouth and your brain. I mean, it's all a very interconnected thing. And so again, when you've got something really sweet in your mouth, your brain adapts to that and says, ooh, energy coming in. But the problem is it's artificial and energy never arrives. And your brain about a half an hour later goes, hey, where's my energy? Where's my energy? It's prepared your body to receive it, but it never arrived because it's fake. And so what happens then is you start grazing. That's your brain saying, I need my energy. You promised me energy. Where's my energy? Give me my energy. And so you may notice when you do artificial sweeteners, you start snacking and grazing a lot because it's a fake out. Now, the only exception that they made was with xylitol, a sugar alcohol. But then just like 3 months later, the Cleveland Clinic released a big paper where they linked the excess consumption of xylitol to blood clots and strokes. Now, I will tell you that I've always had a little bit of a dry mouth, and I sucked on Xylamelts. I mean, I would chew like 10 or 15 of those a day, little tiny little, again, artificial sweetener like mouth things just help your mouth produce a little bit more mucus. And I love the taste of it, and I just did it. And before I knew it, instead of doing 1 or 2 a day, I was doing 5, and then I was doing 10. And I wasn't gaining weight because it was fake, but then the research came out with strokes. And it's like, well, damn, I already have AFib. I'm already on blood thinner. It's the last thing I want to do. The last thing I want to do is do something which can cause or create another risk for blood clots. Now, my last bout of AFib was in December, but I did go into tachycardia about 4 weeks ago. So now I got to do another 3 months of blood thinners just in case. And it's very annoying. Very annoying to have this body do these weird things. So anyway, Robbie, if you're going to do a sweetener, as long as you're not diabetic, man, just do honey. That's all I do now. The only white sugar I have in my house goes into making hummingbird nectar. For me personally, if I need a sweetener, I have honey. And it's not as sweet, but it's so much healthier in the long run. And see, the thing is honey has a lot of really, really good beneficial effects. It helps to fight infection. And we even had research that was testing honey in bladder installations. And I don't remember what happened with that. That might have been like 10 years ago. I remember it was being done in Detroit, but I don't remember the results of that honey bladder installation study. So anyway, And also getting back to fruit, here's a really an easy way to understand acid in fruit. So before a fruit is ripe, like if you ever eaten an unripe apple, it is bitter and acidic as heck. You just can barely get it in you. It's very clearly not ripe. And so what happens is as that fruit matures and gets riper, the natural sugar levels increase and the acids decrease. So the riper the fruit, the lower the acid. Now, the problem here is that when you buy an apple at the store, that apple was probably picked a year ago, 9 months ago, when it was completely unripe. A lot of fruit in the store and vegetables in the store are absolutely picked before they're ripe because they want them to ripe in transit to get to you fairly ripe. But they're never as good as getting fruit from a farmer's market where obviously it ripened in the field, it ripened on a tree. And listen, it's springtime now. I was at the farmer's market yesterday, and we're just starting to get more fresh fruits and veg in. I can't eat greens, so I don't eat greens. So finding fresh fruit and veg in wintertime at a farmer's market is very difficult. You're pretty much, you've got the greens first, and then you got the blueberries. Some of the berries start coming in. And then the zucchini is the zucchini is late summer. Thankfully, we can get a lot of organic fruit in our local grocery store too. And so that's good. But anyway, hey man, it's spring, time for lighter, fresher meals. No more comfort food. Flu season should be done. Although Anne says she's sick with chronic bronchitis, just praying I don't get a bladder flare up. Well, you shouldn't get a flare up from the bronchitis, but you might get the flare up from something you're sucking on that might be irritating. I have a lot of articles over on the website about the things that are bladder friendly for the cold and flu products. Honey, doing honey stuff is great. Okay, I got to put eye drops in. I don't know why my eyes are being weird. Okay. I've already been sitting here for 4 hours. I just sent out a magazine, so Sunday is a work day for me. So I think that's probably why my eyes are saying, hey. Okay. I've got I can usually work in front of a computer now for about 6 hours a day. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. Back in the old days, I could be here for 12 hours, but between my eyes and my pelvic floor, sitting here for long periods of time is definitely challenging. And for those of you who subscribe to our free our free newsletter, I just sent one out to 34,000 people literally an hour ago. You can sign up for it. If you go over to the IC network, well, you know what? I can give you a link here. Hold on a sec. Let me just give you a link. Go and sign up for it. I do it, and listen, I don't send out spam. I completely respect the fact that our mail folders are very full and annoying. So here, hold on. Let me grab that link for you. So just sign up. You can unsubscribe anytime. All right, so YouTube, and you guys, listen, man, I see you're watching, but ask me something. Tell me, give me a sound check, anything. Because we have 1 million views on YouTube now, so I know you're watching, verified by YouTube. I don't know if I'm going to get a plaque or not, one of those silver plaques. I don't know when that comes out. Tanya's, okay, here, hold on. All right, because now I put eye drops in my eyes, so now my eyes are fuzzy. Hold on. And I did just order new computer glasses because my eyes have changed too. Bonnie said, I had to stop my Mirbitric. It had a harsh side effect. Bonnie, what was the side effect? I mean, I really have gotten very few, if any, complaints or reports of adverse events with Mirbitric. So what adverse event are you struggling with, or side effect are you struggling with? Tanya says she uses honey and pure maple syrup. Perfect, girl. Absolutely perfect. You cannot go wrong with honey or maple syrup. All right. Now it is Mother's Day, and I fully expect that people should be out with their moms. We want you to do that. This is not necessarily the time to watch a live support group meeting. You can watch it during the week. These meetings can last anywhere from an hour to 5 hours, depending upon what questions you have. The other thing that I can offer is that we can go into Zoom if you would like to talk to me personally. Whenever we do that, we usually get 5 or 6 people to come and hang out in Zoom and ask questions. So I am here as long as you have questions. And you're not asking me a lot of questions right now, so ask away. What else is going on? Oh, you know what? Hold on a sec. Give me a quick second here. Bonnie says that Mirbitric gave you a headache and consolation high blood pressure. I've never heard of consolation. What does consolation high blood pressure mean? Uncontrolled. Wow. Bonnie, that's really interesting. You're the first to report that. And I think that I really appreciate you doing that. Well, how high did your blood pressure get? I mean, the only other time we see blood pressure issues really in the typical IC patient population are patients who use cyclosporin. And patients with cyclosporin can get very, very, very high blood pressure. It becomes really a severe medical emergency. That blood pressure has to be monitored very, very carefully. I have one of our members, her blood pressure, the first time it spiked was like, I want to say 220 over 100 something. It was horrific. Your top number was 150. Well, that's not terrible. That's not terrible. But if the medication is causing that, then yeah, then it's reasonable. You have to understand, speaking as somebody who has high blood pressure, I was diagnosed with high blood pressure like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and I was shocked. I mean, like, I've always been the healthiest person in the family, very fit, eat well. And I went to the doctor and my blood pressure was 150 over 100. And I was like, whoa. And then they said, okay, just stay here, relax. Didn't go down. And so I came home and I took my blood pressure every day for a week. It was 150 over 100, legit. And what I didn't know, I mean, I've got 2 theories as to why I got high blood pressure. Number one, a menopausal woman. When a woman goes through menopause, their body's ability to process salt diminishes. And so we end up with more salt in our bloodstream, which then our kidneys, et cetera, need more water to get rid of that salt, which just creates the foundation for high blood pressure and all sorts of other things. And I was eating a ton of salt. In fact, the night before that appointment, I literally ate a small bag of Lay's potato chip at midnight. Yeah, I was like, I should have known better. But the other thing that was happening for me back then is I was caring for a very cranky 99-year-old who wanted to drive. And then when he turned 100, he wanted to drive. And he was a World War II vet. He's like, don't tell me what I can't do. I can do whatever the hell I want to do, Jill. You're not my boss. And I'm like, Dad, you can't see. You failed your eye exam at the DMV. We had to go get glasses. That's the only reason you passed. He's like, no, I didn't. I'm like, I was there. No, I didn't. Yes, Dad, I was there. And then he started thinking that his reading glasses were his driving glasses. He's like, well, I'll wear these glasses. Dad, those are not your driving glasses. Those are your reading glasses. And I will tell you that that was the hardest part of caregiving, was having arguments with him about that. I always tried to keep his dignity. I never took away his car keys, but I was listening every minute of every day, literally for the sound of car keys. And as soon as I heard them, I jumped up and I stopped him. And I did it in a very kind way, but I'm like, what do you need? I'm going to go drive around the block. Okay, Dad. He's like, I got to work on the battery. Got to get the battery going. Okay, I'll drive it around the block. It's like, okay, handed me the keys. And it was, he knew, they were kind of a masters at getting me to do things. And I finally put my foot down and said, I'm working right now. I'm working with the patient right now. I can't do it right now. I'll do it in a couple hours. He goes, well, then I'll go do it. It's like, Dad, so I firmly believe that the stress that I was under has played a big role in my blood pressure. And now I'm on 2 meds. My blood pressure is, I can feel it go up every now and then. It's like 128 to 132 over 85, somewhere in there. And I'm like, man, that's a win. I'll take it. Robbie says, oh man, I can relate to your caregiving struggles. Yeah. We love our folks. I will confess, and when I was young, I was really fascinated by older men who in the prime of their lives were they were in the military, because I come from a Navy family, and I was fascinated and yet appalled and struck by how difficult their lives were when they were older, and what it must be like to lose that confidence and to lose that physicality and to lose all of that as we get older. And it just made me really compassionate towards men and women. And so I just vowed that I would always give them dignity and just be there for them, I'm really proud. Anyway. Okay, so again, I am here to talk about IC. You're not giving me a lot to work with right now, even though I got a good, between your 2 platforms, we've got well over 20 people watching. So give me your questions, guys. Give me your questions. Does anybody have any questions? Otherwise, you're just forcing me to riff, which I'm happy to do. I'm really happy to do. AUA meeting coming up next week. That's going to be interesting. By the way, I sent a letter off to Dr. Ann Ackerman at UCLA. She was the one who did the IC biome studies that found that some of us were struggling with a pathogenic lactobacillus. Let me explain that. I think that that's really interesting. So IC feels like an infection for some of us, right? It does. Not all of us, but some of us. And for some patients, your symptoms start after you have an infection, but you treat the infection, but you still have all the symptoms. And so it's perfectly normal for patients to go, well, I must still have an infection. Well, when we learned how to do next generation DNA testing, that allowed researchers to take a really close look at what's living in the bladder, because your bladder is not sterile. It's not. There's a big, robust population of bacteria that live in there that are supposed to be in there. Like in the bowel, for example, there are bacteria that make the food that the cells lining your bowel eat. The human body cannot make the food. Bacteria makes that food. And we think the same thing is happening in the bladder, that there are some bacteria that live in the bladder that essentially nourish the bladder wall. And that, of course, is why antibiotics are so devastating, because when you take an antibiotic, you kill all the good bacteria along with the bad bacteria. Okay. So anyway, when we learned how to do biome studies like 10, 15 years ago, they started looking at the urine of IC patients. It's like, well, maybe there's a smoking gun in here. Maybe there's a Helicobacter pylori. Helicobacter pylori is the bacteria that causes stomach ulcers. And the guy who discovered Helicobacter pylori was laughed out of medical meetings because everybody believed that it was impossible for bacteria to survive in the acid of the stomach. He eventually proved them wrong. I think he might have gotten a Nobel Prize, right? But he was laughed at for many, many years. So we were hoping that they would find a similar bacteria causing problems, like causing a Hunner's lesion in the bladder. But those studies kept finding a normal biome, so nothing abnormal, but a less diverse biome, not as many bacteria as they would hope to find, which means that the biome has been compromised. And again, all of us have been on antibiotics for our symptoms at one point in time, so that's not surprising. And they found an overabundance of lactobacillus. Now, lactobacillus are good bacteria, right? The lactobacillus are a lot widely considered to be the critical, most important bacteria living in our bowel and living in our bladder. So Ann Ackerman saw 5 or 6 studies, and she's like, well, that's really interesting. Let me see if I can replicate that in my laboratory. So she had 90 patients, and she got urine samples, and she looked at their urine, and her initial results made the exact same finding: normal biome, nothing weird, an overabundance of lactobacilli, and less diverse. And she's like, let's look at this a little bit more closely. So the first thing she did that nobody else did is she broke her research apart based on age. And it turned out that patients who are younger have a very different biome than patients who are older. That the patients who are under the age of 45 actually have a fairly slim bacterial load and profile. Whereas if you're over the age of 60 and you're a woman, man, there's all sorts of things growing in there. It doesn't mean that they cause infection. It just means that as we get older and we lose estrogen, acid levels diminish, and the environment becomes more hospitable to all sorts of different bacteria. So it's quite normal for an older woman to just have a lot more different bacteria living in their vagina and potentially in their bladder. But she wasn't done. Then she said, let's look at it based on phenotype. Brilliant. And here's what she found. Patients who were pelvic floor driven, normal biome, nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing wrong. Everything is normal. So there's no reason for them to think they've got infection. There's no reason for them to be doing antibiotics if they're pelvic floor driven. But then she looked at the bladder wall phenotype, and she looked more closely at it. And specifically, she looked at the lactobacillus. Because there's not just one lactobacillus, there's all sorts of strains of lactobacilli. Lactobacillus crispatus, like crispy chicken, crispatus, is a very important beneficial lactobacillus. That is, if you have a biome that's dominated by Lactobacillus crispatus, that's a good long-term future. But she didn't find crispatus. she found a lactobacillus called Lactobacillus inners, INERS, Lactobacillus inners. Now, it's very interesting. Lactobacillus inners wasn't discovered until like 5 or 6 years ago. So normally when they're trying to grow bacteria out of urine, they do a urine culture, and a urine culture it's like a farm. And so imagine that you've got a round plate, petri dish, and in that plate is basically the equivalent of Jello. It's food, it's nourishment. So you put the agar in there, or whatever variation of agar in it. And again, it's just nutrient medium. And then you put drops or streaks of urine on top of that. And the goal here is to see if anything eats it, because if it eats it, it grows. And then as you look at that agar plate over the next 24 hours, you start seeing circles and different colors of things growing as they're consuming that agar plate. So they, that's how they've identified most of the lactobacillus species. But then somebody changed that growth medium and they put blood in it. And a brand new lactobacillus they've never seen before, called Lactobacillus inners, grew on blood. Yikes. Yikes. Wait, what? How does it get the blood? Well, Lactobacillus inners is actually a pathogenic lactobacillus. It behaves like bad bacteria. It destroys cells. Normally, lactobacillus have a lot of different functions. I mean, it eats the food so that the bad bacteria can't grow. It kind of crowds everything out. It controls fungi, candida. Lactobacillus have really, really vital roles in keeping us healthy. But Lactobacillus inners does not at all behave like a good lactobacillus. It doesn't control fungi. And dang it, it damages cells. It's crazy. So she announced this 2 years ago at the American Urology Association meeting, and she'll be teaching the class on IC again this week. I think it's next Friday morning, unless it's already, it should be next Friday morning. And, it's mind-blowing that we actually have kind of a smoking gun in some, but certainly not all patients. Because remember, if you're pelvic floor driven, you got a normal biome. This is for people who are very, very bladder centric. So why does Lactobacillus inners grow? Well, it turns out that it is a very opportunistic lactobacillus that is one of the very first to grow back after you've used antibiotics. And it grows so quickly, it dominates the biome. It just eats all the food, keeps the other lactobacillus from growing. Lactobacillus inners has now been associated with poor long-term outcomes. They found it in bacterial vaginosis, and they found it in the bladders of some patients. So this week we had a patient who had next generation DNA urine testing, and she was 99% lactobacillus inners. I mean, she had, and not only in her bladder, but vaginally, she has a massive infection. And the question now is, how do we treat it? And we don't know yet. And again, this is not for everybody. This is just for a small group of patients. So if this is a lactobacillus that grows after antibiotic use, do you want to treat it with antibiotics? Well, are you creating a self-fulfilling prophecy? You kill it, but then more grow. In contrast, if we introduce an abundance of good lactobacillus, like Lactobacillus crispatus, maybe they can fight it out in the biome. And maybe the crispatus can dominate and beat the Lactobacillus iners, because in the end, that is the way the biome functions. You know, a lot of people are afraid of bacteria. You can't be afraid of bacteria. You're alive because you have bacteria. And in the millions of years that animals have been here and that humans have been here, balance is maintained through bacterial warfare. The good bacteria keep the bad bacteria in check. And it's only since we've been on antibiotics that people started really fearing all bacteria. The problem, though, is that, and again, if there's ever a group of patients who are massively overexposed to antibiotics, it's you and me, because our symptoms suggest infection. I dare you to find a patient who has never been on antibiotics. Almost every IC patient was put on antibiotics, some of you for very, very long periods of time, which may have created the foundation for Lactobacillus crispatus. So anyway, I sent her a message, because I don't know her personally, asking for insight on how patients with Lactobacillus inner should be treated. There's just very little published data on this because it's so incredibly new. Now, when she teaches the class, and especially last year, she ends it with this really important warning to urologists, saying, listen, stop giving antibiotics when you're guessing somebody's having an infection. Stop it, because you're not understanding the long-term ramifications of what those antibiotics are doing to the biome. And she's absolutely right. You know, the mistake that patients make sometimes, but doctors make this too, is here, man, you feel horrible. You are peeing every 15 minutes. Of course you've got infection. That's what your brain is telling you. And of course you reach out to your doctor, and of course you beg for antibiotics. I just begged for antibiotics with my tonsillitis like 6 weeks ago. My doctor didn't want to give them to me. I'm like, give it to me. I can see the white spots. There are white spots on my tonsils. Give it to me. And I had to beg, but I did get them. You know, but it becomes an easy fix. And there are many patients out there who hoard their antibiotics, and you got them just in case. I'm not lying. I got amoxicillin in my bedroom right now. I do it too. Not for my bladder, though. I do it for my tonsils. I tend to get tonsillitis quite quickly. Probably should have my tonsils removed, but anyway, that's another story. But every time you self-medicate, every time you have a diet-induced flare, you drink that cup of coffee, you're going, oh man, it might be an infection. I better take that Septra. I better take that Sulfa. I better take Keflex or whatever it is. And you're just creating this long-term foundation of this dismantling your healthy biome. And this is where people online do a lot of damage, in my opinion, because you will have people online who tell every single one of you, you all have an embedded infection. You all should be on long-term antibiotics. And I'm telling you right now, anybody who says you all have this, you all have that, they don't know what the hell they're talking about, because we have phenotypes now, and those phenotypes are proven. We've got multiple studies. Listen, pelvic floor driven, it's not a bacteria problem at all. It's a pelvic floor problem. Interestingly, Hunner's lesions. Hunner's lesions have now been connected not to a bacterial infection, to a viral infection. So again, taking antibiotics for Hunner's lesion, pointless. They have never found a bacteria associated with Hunner's lesion growth. They have found virus. And for those of us who have widespread pain, if you've got IC, IBS, vulvodynia, or TMJ, or migraines, or fibromyalgia, characterized by very sensitive skin, wicked sense of smell. That's not infection at all. That's a nervous system injury. That's being driven by an injured, traumatized nervous system. And so again, antibiotics completely pointless. So anybody out there who says y'all need to be on antibiotic, they're all lying to you, y'all have infection, they are fundamentally wrong. And that is my stand, and I will stick to it. I go to a lot of international IC meetings, and I'm telling you right now, phenotyping is everything now. Everything. Everybody now, research studies, they're phenotyping first. We don't want to throw away $1 million on a study that puts apples, oranges, and bananas in the study. It's going to fail. You put the pelvic floor patient into a study for bladder wall tract therapy, it's going to fail because the pelvic floor patient is not going to respond to bladder wall therapy. The pelvic floor patient is going to respond to physical therapy. You put a Hunner's lesion patient into a physical therapy study, no problem. They're not going to help much unless they got pelvic floor tension. And the group of patients which we now think has tanked every major IC study is the widespread pain central nervous system group, because their symptoms are not being driven by the bladder wall at all. Their symptoms are being driven by an injured central nervous system. We now know that 80% of those kids have had physical injuries. 20% of those kids grew up in an unsafe, traumatic environment. I'm in this group, So stop self-medicating with antibiotics. What can you do? If you think you have an infection, get some dipsticks. Go down to Walgreens, go to CVS, buy a kit of UTI dipstick tests. Here, I've got samples right here. Hold on. Let's see. Okay, so where is my, that's it's a brand new one. Okay. So here you go. So you're going to get right here a little plastic stick that has 2 pads on it. See that? The top pad is for leukocytes. The bottom pad is for nitrite. Then you're going to pee on it. You just stick it between your legs and pee. And then you're going to wait 5 minutes and see if it changes color. And you can see that what happens, the top pad, if there's a lot of leukocytes, is going to get more progressively purple. The nitrite is going to get kind of cranberry colored. But here's the thing. If you have a double positive, you have infection. And this is where you call your doctor. You take a picture of that dipstick, send it to him, and say, hey, doc, I got an infection. I did a dipstick. Can you order a urine culture for me? Because we don't want to just throw a broad spectrum antibiotic on it because so many infections are resistant to that. You need to go leave a sample so they can test it to make sure they've identified the right one, right? Nitrites are only made by infections. So if you ever have a positive nitrite, you have infection, you need to call your doctor and go have a urine dipstick test. Linda said, can dipsticks give us false negatives? They can, but it's your first tool. It's your first tool that you can use. But here's the challenge, positive leukocytes. Guess what? A bladder wall flare from food is going to give you positive leukocytes. Leukocytes don't necessarily mean infection. That just means your bladder has taken a beating and your body has mobilized leukocytes to the area to try to figure out what's wrong, right? And so if you have a bladder wall flare because you decided to drink Mountain Dew and now the acid has corroded your bladder wall, your bladder's screaming at you, your bladder responds to that. The cells of your bladder respond to that irritation. And they signal your immune system and say, help, 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 invader, invader, invader. And your immune system then sends leukocytes, white blood cells in the area to find the invader and kill the invader. But there's not really an invader to kill. You just drank freaking Mountain Dew. And the acid of the Mountain Dew has irritated your bladder wall. And so the leukocytes swarm through the blood vessels into the bladder wall, and then the bladder wall releases them. I mean, the capillaries release them into the bladder wall to search and destroy. And I can send you pictures. I mean, I can show you pictures if you want to see pictures, videos. I mean, it's amazing the way the human body responds and the bladder responds to infection. So the reason why you have a lot of white blood cells in your urine is because you're in a bladder wall flare. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have an active infection. So look, this is an unopened box. I have them. And I will tell you, in 33 years since I was diagnosed with IC, how many infections have I had? How many infections? I have had dozens of urine tests. They never found infection. Only once did they find infection. Only once in the last 33 years have I actually had a genuine bladder infection. You know, it's amazing. It's just an amazing process. So first line of defense, this. And if you have a double positive, then we're absolutely going to suspect that you might have an infection. Take a picture of it, send it to your doc, go to urgent care. You don't bring the tab. You got to throw that away because that's now contaminated. But take a picture on your cell phone and say, look, I think I have an infection. Can you order a urine culture? Most doctors would be very impressed with your work ethic if you did that. That's very important. All right. Hold on one sec. Robbie says self-driving cars will be so good for the elderly. I'm looking forward to the day when I can use a self-driving car. I am not liking driving as much as I used to. Number one, I'm just totally out of practice because I used to commute to San Francisco, 80 miles each way. I was a really good commuter, but not so much now. And people are crazy on the freeways now. I'm just saying. Christina said, what antibiotic is best to treat a UTI or is the least irritating to the bladder? Okay, so Christina, that is an excellent question. And the answer is nobody can tell you what the best bacteria is to treat your infection. The only way that you can figure that out is with a test. Because there are lots of different types of bacteria, and we have lots of bacteria that are very drug resistant. So 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they just threw what we call a broad spectrum antibiotic at everybody, hoping it would kill it. And we're long past that now, because now we've got a lot of infections that are just super, super drug resistant. And we call them super infections. And so they're already resistant to all the broad spectrum antibiotics. And so that's when we have to use much more dangerous antibiotics like vancomycin. And there are some even more like that are kind of the last resort to kill these infections. So there's just no right answer for that. The urine culture determines the right antibiotic. Now, but your second question is very, very good. And that is, what is the least irritating to the bladder? I can tell you what the most irritating to the bladder is, and that's probably going to be augmentin. The least irritating have been the Septras, the sulfas, but we're all different. We all have different levels of sensitivity. I can remember when I had that one it was a bladder infection that I thought was a flare for 6 weeks, and it got worse and worse and worse. I mean, I just thought it was a flare. And then finally I started having agonizing bladder spasms every time I urinated. And I just was afraid to pee because the pain was so severe. And so I actually drove down to my urologist's office and walked in without an appointment, crying my eyes out. And they had never seen me cry because I ran their support group. I ran the only Kaiser affiliated support group in the country. And I did that for many years. And so literally I walked in and I was just sobbing, and they saw me and they'd never seen me cry, and they just pulled me right back. And I explained my symptom that every time I tried to urinate, I had this agonizing pain shooting up my spine. And she goes, "Don't you know what that is?" I'm like, "Nope." She goes, "That's a bladder spasm." And she took a urine sample and said, "You got a horrific infection. Why did you wait? You should have called us." It's like, Anyway. Linda says, "You're a hero for icy people." I try. I just want to be an angel in a way. My grandmother, my Aunt Betty, taught me when I was a child, and I've never forgotten that. It's just the foundation of my life, to be quite honest. She said, "You have to earn your angel wings." And the little redheaded girl said, "Well, how do I do that, Grandma?" And she said, "You have to be nice. You have to be kind to people, and you have to help people." So I just try to earn my angel wings every day. Linda said, and Linda also said, "My friend was just diagnosed with bladder cancer yesterday. They will be scraping the inside of his bladder to remove the growths." That's how he explained it. I feel so bad for him. Okay, so Linda, there's good news here. And the good news is, of all the cancers out there, bladder cancer is actually considered the most curable and the easiest to treat. The number one cause of bladder cancer is cigarette smoking. So if he's a smoker, man, you got to get him to quit that smoking immediately, because all those carcinogens, when you breathe it in, the smoke and whatever's in that smoke gets absorbed through the lungs, goes into the bloodstream. The bloodstream then knows it's got to get rid of it. It gets down, it gets to the liver, and in some cases it gets to and it will certainly get to the kidneys. And so what happens is all of these toxins end up in urine. And so now you've got basically a pre-cancer stew in your urine. And it's just sitting in your bladder. All these carcinogens are sitting in your bladder, where they're just poking away. They're just poking away at cells. And, understand that cancer is it's the uncontrolled growth of cells. It's kind of the body's own network, cell growth malfunctioning. And so now we have accelerated cell growth, and it just gets bigger and bigger, and then it gets blood supply and all that sort of stuff. So if you're a smoker, all those carcinogens are just sitting there in your urine, just poking away, looking for a way to trigger what could become cancer. So he's got to stop. He's got to stop smoking. I have a picture of, all right, where is it? Let me show you what bladder cancer looks like. Hold on a sec. Show and tell. Let me show you some pictures. Okay. So this is what a Hunner's lesion looks like. Okay, just to give you context here. So a typical IC patient who's got a really badly injured, wounded bladder usually has centers that are very, very red. And then we often see kind of red arms going away from center. When we have atlases now, published atlases for people to see what Hunner's lesions look like. I have a lot more pictures. This is one of my favorite pictures. You see that? That is a stone. That is a bladder stone growing out of the bladder wall. And this happens when the bladder wall has been badly injured. An injured bladder wall, in this case, this patient had major surgery. It's a long story. This does not happen in most IC patients. In his case, he'd had many surgery. He was a surgical injury patient, not a typical IC patient. The last time they did major surgery on his bladder. It disrupted this calcium metabolism, something. And that calcium has to go somewhere, and it goes out in stones. The problem with bladder stones is that when they break off, they can clog the urethra. So kidney stones are painful. Bladder stones can be a real medical emergency. And in this guy's case, he would have to try to pull them out of his urethra so that he could urinate before they went in and cleaned them all up. So bladder stones are yikes. Okay, cancer. So let's look at cancer. So this is bladder cancer. So when you think cancer, you think black melanoma, right? But bladder cancer does not, I do not believe it presents as black. But what you can see here is it actually looks like wet noodles, like rice noodles, clear rice noodles. And that's actually the uncontrolled growth of cells. So that is a good example of what bladder cancer looks like. Bladder cancer can be confined to just the inside of the bladder wall. That's the easiest. That's the most curable for sure. They can just pretty much just cut it out and you're good to go. But it can also progress into the bladder wall. So if it starts going, instead of going into the bladder cavity, it starts going the other way. It can start moving through layers of the bladder, and then that becomes much more serious. And unfortunately, if it's left too long, it can, like any cancer, it can spread elsewhere. Let me see if I have any other pictures here that you might find interesting. Oh, this is really cool. So we talked, some patients have been diagnosed with something called trigonitis. Now, the trigone is a triangular piece of your bladder where you've got ureter, urethra. So your bladder wall is not all the same. The trigone is a part of your bladder that has a lot of hormone receptors. It's very different tissue than the rest of your bladder. And sometimes the trigone looks different. They call it a cobblestone-like appearance. It gets bumpy. And I remember when I started the IC network and I was trying to decide what bladder conditions I was going to include, I did a deep dive into trigonitis. Trigonitis. And what I read back then is that some doctors used to laser off the bumps and others said it was normal. And there was a tremendous amount of debate about, are these bumps on the trigone normal or not? Well, earlier this year, a brand new, and I talked about this in a meeting several weeks ago. I got to do an article on this. Why didn't I do an article on this in my magazine? I got to make a note to do it for my summer magazine. They created a new way of visualizing the bumps of the trigone. It was a grad student who created a new method, which allowed them to look more closely at it. And so let me show you this picture. So this is a bladder wall, part of the trigone, where there are bumps on it. You see that? Isn't that interesting? See the bumps? So these are the cobblestones. Well, it turns out that the bumps are pus pockets. that when you slice the bumps off, there's a little reservoir of pus right there. So that too means that in the small percentage of patients who have been diagnosed with trigone, that there is an active infection in the surface of the trigone. And so what that research study, which was done in Texas, if they found this, they basically lasered them off. And when you laser them off, bacteria can no longer attach to the bladder wall, and it completely stopped all future infections of the trigone. So we have new, very interesting information about trigonitis, these bumps, again, little pus pockets. If we laser it, you're basically curing that patient because bacteria can no longer attach to that skin and infect that skin. So that's very cool. Let me see if there's any other interesting. Always have. I like show and tell. I'm a kid. Any other interesting pictures? I don't think I need to show that right now. What is this picture? Hold on. What? I added a whole bunch of new pictures here into my. Okay, so this is actually part of the trigone. So they created a new way of detecting. Here, I can show you this one. A new way of detecting these bacteria that are just living along the very surface of the bladder. So the green are the bacteria, and it's a fluorescent process. It's fascinating. Anyway, but again, that's not everybody. That's only a small percentage of IC patients. All right, let me go back to your question. Enough show and tell. Peggy. Oh, thank you, honey. She says, I'm a mother to you all. Well, I wish. Linda said, on a different note about the microbiome, at one point I was actually getting allergy injections for candida as my body was reacting so strongly to even normal amounts in my bladder. And Linda, it was our own MAP Research Network and the National Institutes of Health who absolutely confirmed that some patients do have an overgrowth of candida in their bladder. And the more candida you have, the more severe the pain, for sure. That is an undeniable fact. And again, why does that happen? Antibiotic use. You kill the good bacteria, you're letting the candida grow. Linda said, I've had probably 100 negative cultures. Me too, because I'm pelvic floor driven primarily. And that points to the fact that you're also probably more pelvic floor driven. Hello, turnip greens. What do you use on your hair to keep it so thick and luxurious? I use Dove shampoo for an itchy scalp because it can be kind of itchy sometimes. And then I use Earth Sciences. A really thick conditioner, but it's very, I don't know. Hey, listen, I'm telling you right now, for all of you who teased redheads when you were in elementary school, we are getting our revenge because while you're going gray, I'm still red. Growing up as a redheaded kid, not the easiest thing in the world. I'm telling you, it's hard. Linda said he has never smoked. Well, oh, it's okay, honey. It's okay. It can be secondhand smoke. It could be exposure to environmental toxins at work. I mean, there are carcinogens, and I can guarantee you this room, it has a lot of carcinogens in it. It's got a melamine countertop. We try to minimize. It's very difficult to minimize our exposure. The more natural things we can do, the better, for sure. And Linda is at hospice with someone. Linda, you're doing God's work there. I truly hope that your family member or friend are doing okay, and that they're pain-free. Turnip Greens said, I love your name, Turnip Greens. That's her screen name, Turnip Greens. Any thought on how to stop elderly UTIs developing from new medications, pollen, and stress? 71-year-old widow. Okay, so Anne, thank you for putting your name in. Appreciate it. We actually now have several UTI vaccines that are in development that are looking incredibly good. And unfortunately, vaccines are kind of considered dirty words right now, which is a tragedy. Can you imagine having a vaccine against E. coli and Enterococcus faecalis and staph and strep? We're close. That research, I mean, there are like 4 different vaccines that are under development right now. I can guarantee you that we would be a lot farther along if we had a government that believed in vaccines. Unfortunately, we don't. And so now we have millions of people who are struggling with infections. So that's probably the most important thing is the use of vaccines. And I predict we'll probably have one approved in the next 5 years. Because the research was done up in Canada. It was done by Curtis Nickel, fabulous researcher. It's just so incredibly encouraging. Really what you're talking about is bladder wall irritation. And the reason why your bladder wall is so sensitive is because you're 71, honey. You are postmenopausal. I'm not far behind you. I'm 65. I'll be 66 in July. Your bladder, the way your bladder defends itself is with a really thick, robust coating of mucus. So I use this as an example all the time. This is one of the old Elmeron educational postcards. So the way your bladder wall is built is that you have an inner gag layer, and this gag layer is a barrier. As long as you have a gag layer, the irritants in your urine cannot get down here to these cells and cannot get down to nerves to trigger things. And it's not really blue. This is for educational purposes. It's clear. It's clear. So your mouth, your vagina, your vulva, your urethra, and your bladder are mucous membrane covered organs and that mucus is very, very important because it's how the skin defends itself. But here's the problem. It's estrogen dependent. So what that means then is when you're young and you have a lot of estrogen, you have a lot of gag. But at the age of 71, at the age of 66, we are estrogen deficient now. You are in estrogen atrophy. And what that means then is that gag layer gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And now irritants in your urine get here and irritate things. So that cup of coffee you could drink every day in your 30s, 40s, maybe even in your 50s, can't do it in your 60s, 70s because the skin has no defense. The skin cannot defend itself. So it's very, very important that you protect your bladder by following the icy diet more. I mean, that's just vital. It's not the time to be drinking coffee, green tea, black tea, matcha, lemonade, tomato sauce, grapefruit juice, etc. Anything that's really provocative and irritating is gonna tweak that skin. There is just no doubt about that. So how do we defend it? Well, number one, estrogen. That when you give the skin estrogen, it immediately plumps up and starts to make gag. So the most natural thing you can do is actually to use topical estrogen. And the challenge here is you're never going to have a 20-year-old bladder anymore. You definitely have a more vulnerable bladder. There's just no doubt about that. So using that topical estrogen regularly is going to be important. This is where you might benefit from a chondroitin-based supplement that can help kind of coat and protect your bladder. You can see it back here. That's bladder builder back there. Or if you keep getting E. coli infections, you can do Prevent, which is an excellent over-the-counter supplement. It's like Allura that has a really strong track record of making the environment very difficult for E. coli to survive. Hold on a sec. Charlene said, I've been having nocturia with burning, fine during the day. It seems related to an increase in Zoloft, IC, or Hunners. So, Charlene, I just did a big article on nocturia, and there are kind of a couple of different things. And in fact, it's in our magazine. It's in the spring magazine, which is just released on Friday. So here's what, I like to think I'm very informed, and I study all the time. I mean, legit, I really do study. But there are still things that I don't necessarily understand that I've got to learn a lot more about. And I did not understand the other conditions that are so strongly linked to what's happening with you. So if you're normal during the day, but you're peeing all night long and you're going, where is this urine coming from? Like, I legit stopped drinking water at 7 or at 6 and I'm peeing all night long. Where is this urine coming from? It's coming from edema in your legs. It is. That as we get older, the veins in our blood vessels, the valves in our veins begin to malfunction. So basically, it's kind of like a fish ladder comes to mind, where fish jump from here to here to here to here to get to the next level. So in our blood vessels, we have, they're like inner valve / ladder. It's a just push blood up, right? It moves up, closes, moves up, closes, moves up, closes. And it's obviously incredibly fast. Well, as we get older, these veins start to malfunction. And so blood starts to settle. And so you may have noticed that you've got kind of swollen feet, or you may notice that when you take your socks off, there's an indentation there. And that's a sign the fluid is collecting down there. And you could have 1.5 liters of fluid down in your ankles and feet and have no symptoms. You have no clue there's this ginormous volume of fluid in your legs. And gravity keeps it down there. But then you go to bed. And instead of gravity holding it down, now you're flat on your back and your legs are at the same height as your heart. So what happens is that fluid is rapidly reabsorbed and processed by the kidneys. Because your kidneys have a job to get rid of it. And all night long, you're peeing out all this extra fluid. So I would be looking first at, so how can you tell? You can push in. If you can push in on the top of your foot, and it leaves an indentation there, that you got some edema going on. So the question then is, why is there another reason why we're holding more fluid, especially if we're on the wee bit older side? And the answer is yes, salt. If you're eating a very salty diet, that forces your body to dilute the salt by bringing in a lot of water and retaining a lot of water. Sugar. If your blood glucose is high, same thing happens. You start storing a lot of water as your body's trying to process all that glucose. But here's the one that I thought was the most interesting. Normally, when you go to bed, there's a hormone called vasopressin that suppresses urination. It just slows everything down to help you get a good night's sleep. And then as soon as you wake up, the vasopressin wears off, and now we've got kidneys that are working normally, right? Alcohol suppresses vasopressin. So in other words, if you drink alcohol before you go to bed, yeah, you might fall asleep right away because it's sedating, but it literally turns your urinary tract on like it would be at noon because it's suppressing that hormone that normally calms everything down. So excess salt, excess sugar, excess alcohol can also be linked to that. Now, if you're peeing large amounts of fluid all day and all night, and you're going, where is this coming from? My God. That's actually called polyuria, and that's usually a sign of diabetes. Either you're drinking way too much water, or we're dealing with a diabetes issue. Starting to feel thirsty all the time, you're peeing all the time, lots of fluid. That could be that. So anyway, Nocturia, nice little article right in our new magazine. So think about getting it. That keeps us working. The small but mighty IC network. And again, for those of you who came in, we're celebrating here because we got 1 million views on YouTube. You know, I find myself really, really frustrated because it's very hard to get articles on IC, and it's very, writers don't want to write about it, editors don't want to feature it, talk show hosts don't want to talk about it, actresses and actors who have it don't want to go on TV because they don't want people to laugh at them. And now, of course, we have social media, which is just brutal. People will make fun of anybody for anything on social media. So getting the word out is very, very difficult. And I'm thrilled that we now have 1 million views of IC related information as of yesterday. Yay! Peggy said, my dad had bladder cancer about 20 years ago. They used a tuberculosis medicine to cure it. Yeah, that's called BCG, Bacillus calmette-guerin. Never came back. He passed away 2 years ago at 92. Number one, he had a wonderful long life, and I'm really glad the BCG works. So BCG, Bacillus calmette-guerin, is a deactivated tuberculosis bacteria that strips the bladder wall. And it is like the number one treatment for bladder cancer. They did test it with IC. It failed, and so it's no longer used for IC at all. But for bladder cancer, it is a first-line intervention. Robbie said, we need a vaccine for Epstein-Barr. Yeah, we do. And I want to say we need a vaccine for HPV, but we have a vaccine for HPV. I mean, like the number one cause right now of pelvic cancers and throat cancers is the human papillomavirus. And I was just reading one country like Denmark had completely stopped cervical cancer with the HPV vaccine, making sure that young girls and boys in their teens got the HPV vaccine so that they didn't pass that along. HPV is brutal. I had a patient call me. She was like 32, and she had HPV-driven cancer in her urethra. So she had a tumor in her urethra. The human papillomavirus, there are many different types of HPV. Some are benign, some are absolutely cancerous. And they're aggressive, very, very difficult cancers. And so you think about people who've had throat cancer, that's often HPV driven. The same is true with rectal cancer. I think Farrah Fawcett Majors had HPV-driven rectal cancer, but it can also be in the vagina, and it can also be in the urethra. So this young girl who had I think she had just had a baby, they found HPV cancer. So they removed her bladder, they removed her urethra, and they removed her vagina and her uterus. They removed it all because the HPV was everywhere. And the crazy thing is they told her she could go back to work in 6 weeks. And she was at 6 weeks and in agony. And she's like, and she called me, how do I go back to work? I went, they told you 6 weeks after having everything removed? That's nuts. I mean, this is a year-long recovery. You're not going to go back to work in 6 weeks after having all that removed, maybe 6 months. That poor girl. And if she had had the HPV vaccine when she was young, it would have stopped that cancer. And if her partner had had it when he was young, it would have stopped any spread of that cancer. Science is good, my friend. Science is good. It saves lives and saves suffering. Charlene said, don't drink or eat sugar, very limited salt intake, no swelling or diabetes. Okay, excellent. Me too. I don't eat salt and I don't eat sugar. The only sugar literally I eat is that little tiny bit in this diluted. There's a little bit of sugar in that, and that's it. All right, so let me go back to your question then. So could Zoloft cause nocturia? But you have Hunner's lesions. So as long as you have a wound on your bladder, especially if it's on the back side of your bladder and you're laying on your back, urine is pooling in the wound, and that's going to be very irritating. That's why we want to treat Hunner's lesions quickly, for sure. So hopefully, and generally what they would do is cauterize it. They would inject it with a steroid, but now we have lactoferrin, like a first line of defense against Hunner's lesion. It's just to supplement lactoferrin. Lactoferrin is an important protein found in our immune system. Our body makes lactoferrin. It's in our eyes. It's in our tears. It's in our vaginal fluid. It is a front line of defense for our own immune system. It's perfectly normal. But unfortunately, as we get older, our bodies can sometimes struggle to make lactoferrin. So they have now been studying the use for about 20 years now of lactoferrin obtained from cows, and also bioavailable lactoferrin made in a laboratory to see if that will improve our body's ability to fight off infection. The IC study that was done 2 years ago, it was 31 patients. It was done at a university in Italy, and it was a fantastic study. They did cystoscopies before patients started lactoferrin. They mapped out the lesions. They mapped out the condition of the bladder wall. They also did blood testing to measure systemic inflammation. They gave them lactoferrin for roughly 6 months. At the end of that 6 months, 28 out of 31 patients were completely symptom-free, and their red inflamed bladders had become pink and healthy, and Hunner's lesions had virtually disappeared. So that's not what am I trying to say here? That is not insignificant data. Yes, it is 31 patients. It would be nice if it were 500 patients, but it's a great start. And the benefit of lactoferrin is that it's fairly benign. It like literally comes from cow's milk. And so this came out a week after I had my double mastectomy. I had to sit on it for a couple months while I was healing from my own surgery. And there's actually research with lactoferrin and cancer. So I now take it now for that too, to help prevent any further growth of my cancer. Hopefully it's all gone. It's all cut out. And my lymph nodes were clear. So we're going to cross our fingers there. Charlene says, you had a fulguration with steroids like a miracle during the day, but you still have problems at night. Well, the other thing we see with nighttime urination, and this would be especially true in a patient with Hunner's lesion, is that there's usually something during your day that's tweaking your bladder, and you just don't realize it's tweaking your bladder. So a multivitamin, something with supplements with vitamin C, supplements with cranberry, chocolate, the classic IC diet stuff, even a chemical irritant. Any of those could be, I mean, it's just, if we were to do a deep dive, Charlene, feel free to give me a phone call this week. I mean, I talk with patients every single day. My only day off is Saturday. I work 6 days a week right now. And I'm happy to, because I got a lot of stuff I really want to do. So I'm excited to do that. But I bet if we did a deep dive, there's something that you think is innocuous that might not be innocuous, even alkaline water. In fact, I just adjusted our diet database and I put alkaline water in caution, because alkaline water it's bleach. It's very, very diluted bleach. Bleach is alkaline. It might be incredibly diluted, but if you ever spill bleach on your hand, it gets really slippery, right? Because it's dissolving the scales. So the only context for alkaline water in the IC patient is if you drink coffee, if we need to alkalinize the acid in that coffee, yeah, you could sip a little bit of alkaline water. But doing alkaline water every day, no. That's just going to strip good normal tissue down there over time, in my opinion. Peggy's going for a walk with her husband. Excellent. She says, you have a great afternoon, everybody. Blessings to all. Charlene said, had a fulguration with steroids. It was like a miracle during the day. Yeah, right. I already read that. Anne says, sometimes peeing at night is overactive bladder. Yeah. Well, so there are 3 different types of nocturia. There's polyuria, where you're just peeing all the time because of diabetes. Then there's nocturia, where you're peeing at night. And then the third group are people with sensitive nerves. And what did they call that? Which is essentially kind of the bladder wall phenotype. So what is that called? Bladder reservoir dysfunction. In this type, the issue isn't the volume of urine, it's bladder sensitivity. Patients feel urgency and fullness even when the bladder isn't actually full. This is common in IC, where irritated and hypersensitive nerves trigger frequent urges to urinate. One key difference is that these patients often struggle with bladder pain, especially as the bladder fills with urine. And usually that pain improves when the bladder is empty. And these are the patients who are going to be stress-induced, because stress can irritate nerves. Chronic UTI can irritate the nerves within. There are lots of causes of neuroinflammation. But our focus has to be on calming nerves down. And that's where Peora, PEA, or pea leaf have the potential of really shining, because palmitoyl ethanolamide relaxes nerves and reduces pain. So that's also the lactoferrin and the PEA. That's the future of IC supplementation. A lot of the old supplements like aloe they don't make sense anymore. I mean, there are companies that want to sell it to you. I mean, I have aloe in the IC Network shop, but I don't encourage it very much anymore. We don't have a single published study showing that aloe is helpful for the bladder wall or IC. And let me just back that up. And I'm going to go over to the National Library of Medicine right now. And let me just go there and let's just see if anything has been published. All right, so I'm at the National Library of Medicine. I'm typing in interstitial cystitis and the word aloe. Is there anything? Nothing. Nothing. So now that we're phenotyping, we can really kind of fine tune what the right supplement would be. I think the only context for aloe is very, very short-term use after a bladder wall flare, in my opinion. In contrast, PEA, I've got great research with PEA. I've got great research with lactoferrin. We've got great research with chondroitin. We have supplements. We've got good, solid research supporting their use. We just don't have that for aloe anyway, and we never had. It's just not there. And companies want to sell you stuff, and I understand that, but money is tight right now. And if you only have $100 to spend or $50 to spend a month on whatever, are you going to put it on something where there's not a single piece of research ever published in a legitimate magazine showing that it's helpful? Or are you going to put it on something where 28 out of 31 were pain-free? Aloe, lactoferrin. Aloe, lactoferrin. Easy choice. Going to do the lactoferrin. Or any of the other supplements, depending upon what your phenotype is. That is my opinion. Anne says, what is it called? A bladder reservoir disorder? What was the exact language here? Because that was new. I'd never heard it talked about like that. Bladder reservoir dysfunction, which is essentially overactive bladder. Same thing. Nerves in the bladder wall are irritated. That's essentially it. All right. Now, listen, for you guys on YouTube, I got an error that said the chat disconnected. And so that may be why I'm not seeing anything you writing. But if anybody out there wants to try putting something in the chat, that would be great. I would like to know if that's working because it doesn't look like it's working. Okay. And again, I will be here as long as you have questions. It's been a little slow day because most of you are hanging out with your moms, which is what I want. And speaking of moms, I want to read something that I wrote. Tanya, is chondroitin off limits to me with a shellfish allergy? No, you just have to look at the source. A lot of chondroitin comes from chicken now. And some chondroitin is actually made in a lab. So there are non-shark fin based, and shark fin chondroitin is essentially banned on Amazon anyway. It's banned through much of the world because it's just destroyed millions of sharks. I mean, the shark fin industry is disgraceful. But you always want to look at the label, and normally the label would say chondroitin from chicken or whatever other source. Sometimes chondroitin can also come from cow trachea. So in the slaughterhouse, they isolate the trachea. It's kind of gross. And they use that trachea. They isolate the chondroitin out of the trachea. The European Union banned cow trachea years ago because they believed that it carried a significant risk of mad cow disease. Because in and amongst the trachea is a lot of nerves, and mad cow disease kind of lives on nerves. And so they sent a lot of their cow trachea to the United States. And I remember Bev Lauman, who was one of our absolutely best IC support group leaders years ago. She found Whole Foods chondroitin was from cow trachea, and she was able to get them to stop that. But this was like 25 years ago. Charlene said it's working. I agree. Aloe vera not helping. We'll order the pea leaf or Peora. They're two separate products, Peora or pea leaf. So let me show you the bottle. Hey man, it's warm here. I'm wearing shorts. I hope it's warm for you. So this is pea leaf. This is Peora. They're essentially the same thing. I took the ICPEA study to both of these companies, and they both made PEA products for us. Peora was first. So this is what I take. This has been out for 3 or 4 years. Excellent reviews on Amazon. Pea leaf came out last year, and you can only get it on Amazon. We don't have it in the IC Network shop. This is like, I think that 4.5 or 4.7. This is like 3.8, 3.6. This has a few more people saying that it's flared them. This doesn't have any as far as I know. So you can get this right in the IC Network shop if you want to try it. You know, I remember my training is in pharmacology, drug development. So my brain is always going, what can we do that might help? So I always have lots of thoughts about, you know, because the fact of the matter is that there are patients out there suffering. And if there's a way that we can reduce that suffering, shouldn't we do that? And given the fact that we have very few therapies for IC and our only oral FDA-approved medication for IC, Elmeron, is now linked to blindness and inflammatory bowel disease and colectomies and polyposis. Doing things that are not, I mean, the options are pretty slim. And this is why supplements have gained a tremendous following. And they're legit followings because there's good IC research behind them. Just not FDA approval. FDA approval is, I don't even know how much it would cost to get something FDA approved now. Maybe $50 million, maybe $100 million. I don't know, to do all the research. And that's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Tanya said, are your supplements from chicken like Bladder Builder? As far as I know, they are. I do not believe that I have ever sold. No, I take that back. Early days of Cystro Protect, I think there might have been shark fin in that at first, but that got replaced. Let me look at labels here. So there's Bladder Builder. Ow. Ow. There's Bladder Rest. Hold on. There's Cystomed. All right. I know that natural. Okay. Now I have to go get my Okay, where are my reading glasses? These are my computer glasses. I'm freaking old now. I have to have different glasses. Hold on. I got to go get my reading glasses. I literally, like, last week went into the supermarket. I couldn't read the labels. That's a first. I have one eye nearsighted and one eye farsighted, and they balanced perfectly until about 5 years ago. Okay, so let's just look. So for Bladder Builder, It doesn't say it on that label. They just redid the label. Let me look at this one. I think that they use bioavailable chondroitin. You know, I think I'm going to have to go to their website. You can only put so much on a label. Cistro Protect for sure is from chicken. I think that these other ones are bioavailable. But this says, but the glucosamine is from a crustacean shell. Yikes. You know what? Tanya, do me a favor. Because I just had this conversation with them and like literally a month ago, and I don't remember exactly what they said. So let me here, hold on a sec. I'm gonna text the CEO. We're doing a live meeting right now. Who is allergic to fish and wanted to know all right. Yeah, all the labels have been redone. So that piece that I was looking for is changed. So I will get an answer for you 100%. Oh, wait, I'm looking at the wrong bottle. Okay. Okay, so an ode to our moms. There's a quiet kind of strength that often goes unseen. Oh, wait, I can take my reading glasses off and put on my computer glasses now. No, I have to read, darn it. There's a quiet kind of strength that often goes unseen. The strength of mothers who care for children with disabilities. It doesn't make headlines. It isn't measured in milestones or accolades, yet it is present in every early morning appointment, every sleepless night, every moment of patience, every hug, and unwavering love. Our mothers became experts in ways they never expected. They learned medical terms, navigated complex healthcare systems, and sat through countless doctor's visits, often acting as our historian, our advocate, and protector all at once. They noticed the smallest changes, asked the hard questions, and pushed for answers when others might have settled. It is a role that demands both resilience and tenderness, often at the same time. But most importantly, they provided unconditional love, the kind that shows up every day, regardless of exhaustion or uncertainty, the kind that celebrates progress in all of its forms, no matter how small it may seem to the outside world. A mother's work is not easy. It can be isolating and overwhelming, and too often it goes unrecognized. Yet these mothers continue lifting, guiding, comforting, and fighting for their children in ways that are both ordinary and extraordinary. They remind us what devotion truly looks like. It's not perfection, but presence, not grand gestures, but consistent care, not just strength, but a deep well of compassion that never seems to run dry. As Mother's Day approaches, we want you to know that we see all that you have done for us. Your love and your kindness changed our lives for the better. You are seen, you are valued, and you are loved. And for those whose mothers are no longer here, her love has not left you. It has simply taken a quieter form. It lingers in the way you care for others and the courage you find on difficult days. May you always feel her support in moments of doubt, her warmth in moments of loneliness, and her pride in all that you do. Love like hers doesn't fade. It endures, steady and unbreakable, and is carried with you wherever your life leads. Happy Heavenly Mother's Day, Helen Osborne. Thank you for driving me to the doctor so many times, for sitting at my side whenever I was scared and in pain, for always having a shoulder that I could cry on, for traveling with me to every IC conference here and abroad, and for being not only a mother, but a dear, dear friend and confidant. I feel your presence every day. And there is a picture of my mom right there. I'm not going to say I miss you because I think she's here. All right, Tanya's heading out. You guys, last call for questions. We've been going for 2 hours now. Last call for questions. This is Mother's Day. People are out doing things with their family. Tanya, you absolutely can. My email address is easy. It's icnetwork@mac.com. All right, my friends, I believe that we are done for the day. I believe that I'm going to go over to the lake and walk around the lake. I'm going to say bye. I will see you next week. I will have reports from the American Urology Association next week and all the new research. And if you find these meetings helpful and you've stuck around to the very, very end, please think about becoming an IC Network member. Make sure you like and follow both our YouTube channels and our Facebook channel. All right.